Hello.
Please take your seats. Once again, the Slido for the questions. And for now, I hand over to our moderator, Sylvia.
Yes, thank you, Luke. Welcome again to everyone, and welcome to this first panel on governing food system transformation. We will specifically look into the question above. So how can we improve policy decision to reflect food system transformation at all levels, local, regional, national, EU? I don't think I could start this panel without acknowledging the political times we're facing at the moment. So in 2019 and in 2020, we had this huge, let's say, environmental push and environmental energy, let's say, with the European Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy. And now we're seeing a bit more of a reticence politically regarding that, which is also a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to come together. It's a great opportunity to see how to accelerate the food system transformation at the local level, perhaps, and that it can then translate, higher up. So let's, acknowledge that, yes, it's a bit more difficult than a couple of years ago, but yes, it's also a great opportunity. So in terms of FoodSHIFT specifically on this topic, you can check out the FoodSHIFT Living Lab Lighthouse posters that are on display at the lab stalls, as well as online the governance section of the toolkit that has been spoken about before. As Luke said, you have the Slido questions. We really hope for your participation. Lena here will be telling the speakers what your questions are. You can upvote other participants' questions as well. So please get going. And now I would like to introduce our excellent speakers of today. We have Alexandra Nicolacopoulou from DG Sante. She has headed the work of on the Farm to Fork strategy and recently also the Sustainable Food Systems Framework. We have Ana Moragues Fau. She is Senior Research Fellow Ramon y Cajal at the University of Barcelona. You even put yourselves in the right order, so that's great. We have Beatrice Waltall from FoodSHIFT Governing the Transition leader. She's also a human geographer, sociologist, activist, researcher. And last but not least, we have Małgorzata Bartena from FoodSHIFT as well in Wrocław. She's a project coordinator at the Wrocław municipality. Our speakers now will have 1 minute for a speed challenge. Lena here will be showing you when your time is almost up with a huge lemon So you will see that. You have 1 minute to tell us about what we call the speed challenge. So to introduce what for you is extremely important to be addressed regarding specifically this topic. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to Alexandre. So what is your 1 minute speed challenge? What is important to address in this context?
Oh, it's 1 minute. In the last 4 years, I had many challenges working on the sustainability of the food systems. And one thing it is two things, sorry, I will say two things, that I find we really need to address and find solutions, not only at EU level, but also at local level, at regional level, and at member state level, but also the stakeholders, both at private level and at public level, is to work in a way that puts different disciplines together. Sustainability of food system means that we address environmental dimension, social, health, economic dimension. So when we put all these things together, there are trade-offs. If there is no cooperation, we will never manage. And change of mindset. Okay, I will finish. And the rest I will say in the discussion.
It's quite difficult within 1 minute. So
Yes.
that's the challenge within the speed challenge. Anna.
Okay, super quick. Well, thanks for inviting me here. This a very exciting panel and day. I would say that for me, one of the biggest challenges is understanding what are the different powers that we have in the food system and how we can mobilize them for sustainability transitions. I do think that right now, for example, in terms of cities, everybody's saying with great powers comes great responsibilities, which is, by the way, a sentence that Spiderman has kind of popularized. But I think that we don't understand really what those powers are. There are regulation power, fiscal powers, but there are also pragmatic powers, and we need to understand better which are the different powers that different levels have, from the local to the national to the regional, and they differ, but also what are the different powers that there are in civil society, in the diversity within that, and in the diversity within the private sector as well. So, and within that, I would say that we also have to raise up our ambition. I don't think we can lower our ambitions. It's a moment to be ambitious in terms of what we want and what we want to achieve in the food system. Thanks.
Yeah, Beatrice, please.
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest challenges is actually that this transformation, there is no silver bullet, there is no single solution. It requires a really comprehensive, adaptive, and relational approach to policymaking that takes into account the unique challenges of each place, but also the opportunities of each place, while also connecting to the wider context. So not in isolation, but in relation. And how this can be done, we've learned through FoodSHIFT throughout the last 4 years, many different pathways, place-based approaches, responses that take into consideration collaboration, multi-stakeholder engagement, cross-sectoral approaches. Systemic thinking is really important, and many other principles, but how they are responded is really individual. So just to give one example, the others you can find on the governance lighthouses, how to connect and resonate with a place-based approach. In the city of Wrocław, they actually linked it to a story, the resilient city. So a resilient city takes into account green spaces, health, education, and that resonated with the policymakers, but it also connected to the Green Deal. So they managed to have a place-based approach that people could identify with and connect to a larger context.
Yeah, thank you, Margareta.
Thanks, Beatrice. I have 30 more seconds. Thanks to you. So for Wrocław municipality and I guess many Polish cities, the biggest challenge was generally to start working on food topic. It's what Christian said, that our biggest challenge was to set food on the agenda of municipal working. And Beatrice mentioned how this developed, but starting working on food, starting working on this project, actually, we weren't sure where this project was for us. So thank you, University of Wrocław, for inviting us to the project. And yeah, and also cooperating with other departments and just discussing this topic, because in municipality, when we started the project, we didn't have department or unit responsible for food, not to mention food policy. Thank you.
Thank you to all. Very interesting, relevant food for thought, pun intended. Alexandra, I want to see with you, we have been hearing about the farm to fork strategy. Within that, there is this legislative proposal of a sustainable food system. You have been working on it intensely for the past years. Can you tell us, what is happening? And also in terms of governance specifically, would the sustainable food systems law also address that in some way?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, the last 4 years, there have been a lot of intense work on different initiatives of the farm to fork strategy. The initiative on sustainable food systems was one of the last ones that were planned to be delivered end of 2023. Unfortunately, there is some delay because of the complexity of this endeavor. And we must also take into account that we are in the last year of the mandate of this commission. So unfortunately, the timing, I would say, it's not very good. You have also followed, all of you, the difficult discussions around the implementation of the Green Deal. I would say that we were not very lucky because we had two big crises in the middle of the implementation of the strategy, which did not facilitate things. What does it mean? And this comes to the challenges. We had to deal with short-term challenges where we had to find short-term solutions, immediate. With the pandemic, with the war in Ukraine, food security became the priority. And there is always the risk that we lose sight of the long-term objectives. So this is what we have seen also with the stakeholders and all the discussion that has taken place in the European Parliament, mixing up the objectives of the sustainability with the objectives of food security, which actually I consider they are not incompatible, they should go together. In terms of governance, the framework is already a very good example of transdisciplinary work, because in order to work on this framework, for the first time, we had 4 Directorate Generals working together, which is really a novelty in terms of governance and policy development in the European Commission. DG Sante, DG Mare, DG Environment, and DG Agri. And these 4 DGs already, they have some conflicting interests traditionally. And I would say that it was a successful endeavor. Now, the framework in itself, in terms of content, I believe it would be really instrumental to set the foundations for different governance approaches to deliver on sustainable food systems. How? By engaging all stakeholders, by requiring or encouraging member states to develop initiatives with policy labs, strategies, giving power to cities, to regions, to work with the citizens, to develop campaigns, education, and also to use the potential of the public procurement. This is also one very important area where we see that cities have a very important role to play. We have very good examples now of cities working on a sustainable public procurement, and the framework would really accelerate and facilitate providing all the empowerment, I would say, to the different actors of the food system.
Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you also for making the point about, keeping in mind the long term, very important, and also the fact that food security is just not in competition with sustainability. So thank you for that. I think we can all agree with that here. I want to now shift to Beatrice and Małgorzata so that you can bring us a bit of the food shift story. First, Beatrice, so you spoke about the Food Shift Governance Lighthouse. Can you tell us, you already did a bit, but could you delve into it a bit more? And what are the lessons learned really that could benefit everyone here?
Yeah, my pleasure. So the Governance Lighthouse was actually an initiative that really grew out of the FoodSHIFT context. That was not part of the original plan, the grant agreement or the goals that we had, but it was a need articulated by the labs, in FoodSHIFT language, the FALs, that they said, we've done so much, we focused for 4 years on our activities, but we kind of lost the big picture, the side, what have we achieved? And is there a way to synthesize these experiences and knowledges that we gained and achievements? And then I said, sure, I think it's a great idea. Let's do this together. And so we looked into theory as well, but also the experiences. What are important principles that fosters a food system governance, a food system transformation? What are important governance principles? And there are many, 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 but within FoodSHIFT, we identified 6 principles that you can also find in the lighthouses, which is citizen-driven system approach, cross-sectoral approaches, multi-level approaches, place-based approaches, and multi-stakeholder engagement. And then we addressed the living labs and asked, okay, can you tell us about your story? How did you go about? Who did you reach out to? What was the process? What were the challenges? And we created so-called impact stories. And at the beginning, some living labs said, well, but we didn't address those principles. Can we focus on that? And I said, sure, just highlight what you have done. And then collectively, there will be a big picture. But the lessons learned, what came out is that all files actually addressed all principles, but they weren't aware of it. And this is something important that we want to bring to the foreground, to also become more aware of what you're doing, to have an idea, also that helps in steering where you need to go. But all files already address these principles. That means they really have a good condition to foster the transformation. And that was a surprise outcome for all of us. And yeah, I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, you should be. It sounds something that can be really applied, to more situations. So that's absolutely great. So Margareta, you told us a bit about that one achievement was really to put food on the agenda. So can you tell us a bit more about this journey? How did you manage to do that?
How much time do I have?
4 minutes.
Okay, so it's gonna be short. So once we started the project, then the COVID came, and we start to realize how food is important for the food security of city. Because before we used to think that food topic is more for like regions, not for cities. But then because of the project and COVID and other projects actually, we decided, okay, it's time to learn what we've already been doing, and then how far can we go with this? So we just had this agenda. We reached for different departments, units, and started to ask what actually you're doing that is related to food. And we found out that there are many, many actions, because we've been working with kids at schools. So it was like education department, health department, social department, economic development department. And finally, once we have what we've been working on, we thought, wow, perhaps we could apply to sign the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So that was the beginning. So we applied and we signed the pact. And it was like city's a statement that we're gonna continue this journey. And right now, after 4 years, we're working on food policy. It's not gonna be separate policy. It's gonna be embedded in food strategy, because in city strategy, because there is one thing like that is typical for Poland, I suppose, that food is not really in municipal obligations. It's not, according to law, the part of our duties. I mean, it's scattered around the different departments. It's somewhere in health, it's somewhere in education, but like formally, regions are more responsible for dealing with food, and that's why, like in Poland, I guess we have 4 or 5 cities that focus on food topics, and all of them started this because of a project they were involved in. So this type of project helps cities to start thinking about this topic and develop these topics and just put it and start discussion with other stakeholders and discuss the importance of the food. As I said before, COVID and also war in Ukraine made us more aware of it and in a way helped us. But that's the sustainability approach and resilience approach. When you start thinking that resilience is not only protection in case of flood and hurricanes and other phenomena, but also in terms of COVID. And yeah, you just have to think in a very resilient way. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this experience and also for showing us how a project lives on in a way by starting this journey in several cities. That's great. Anna, now you work for the Food Action and Research Observatory. If you could tell us a bit more about that, because from what I understand, you really see the need for having something that inspires people to feed themselves in a healthy, sustainable, fair way. So why did you see the need for FARO in Barcelona specifically?
Okay, so FARO is the Food Action and Research Observatory, which just has been created by the University of Barcelona, and I've been one of the promoters and the director right now. So FARO means lighthouse in Spanish, and basically this is a space where we are pulling together different disciplines from nutrition, biology, social work, anthropology, law, economics, sociology, to work together on addressing food system challenges. Why are we doing that? I think there's one clear response is we all need to do things differently. I think we're all quite aware of that, and academia is not an exception. And we need to deliver policy recommendations and do evaluations and do research, but we also have to create these new spaces where we actually address these challenges collaboratively. And this many times means also having debates and discussions about the pluralisms that there is inside science and evidence, and being able to have these dialogues and bridge and create these bridges as well. Across them. So that's why we have developed FARO, but it's also a place where our aim is to co-produce knowledge with society, to be like a kind of like science shop, like open space where we can actually respond to the demands of society. And the reality is that we're having a very strong support from the local administration, the City Council of Barcelona, the regional government, but also the national government in Spain, because I think institutions are really aware of this need of collaboration. And I think that public universities have a responsibility, have a power and a responsibility there to also deliver on this front. So that's a bit what FARO is trying to do. It's not going to be an easy journey, but I think we, as in the academic space, we need to be part of that journey as well. So
yeah, no, totally agree. So thanks for that. I now want to, before turning to our audience questions, so again, if you want to ask a question, you can use a slide over there. One last very easy question for you all, for whoever wants to take it. We're talking about food system transformation, right? And we could not acknowledge the fact that it is complex, fragmented, and there are a lot of power imbalances in the current food system. Do you have any pearls of wisdom to share with us in terms of how to try to improve the situation of power imbalances at the level that you are working on? I know, not an easy question, but I thought perhaps we can give it a go. Too difficult, too complex.
Me, from my perspective, what I see as an obstacle at the moment is what Anna has just described about an initiative which takes place at the level of academia in Barcelona. This is just the beginning, but actually to arrive at the point to have significant progress means that, yes, we all understand the urgency. This is what I have seen. We all agree with the objectives, but when it comes to how we get there, we continue to work and think the same way we have been done is the status quo. So something has to change. And what has to change is not that we are missing the solutions or that we are in lack of creativity about it's more to really break this silo approach in the way we work. So, and this, as I say, at all levels, at the level of the EU Commission, at the level of member states, lobbying, stakeholders, and academics. And I really believe that academia has a very important role to play because they are kind of neutral, let's say, actors. But also I would really, and I think it starts slowly, even at the university in the studies, to have different disciplines which are looking more food system and not necessarily agricultural or food technology or food safety. So we really need this food system discipline to develop already at the level of education at the university.
Yeah, thank you. Would anyone like to, Anna, I see you're ready.
Maybe just to follow up with what Alexandra was saying, I think there are initiatives like EU projects that push this in that direction. And also there are like the higher education system at the European level is also changing. For example, I'm involved in a European master's that is challenge-based. So it's about like solving challenges, and there's a food track. So students have like very different backgrounds. So it is challenge-based. So I think that that's important. And as you were saying, breaking silos and being able to really enact this transdisciplinarity, not just talk about it, but actually do it and walk it is, I think is very relevant in terms of other aspects. In terms of power imbalances, I think there's something about understanding what are those powers, how are things happening, like who has power to do what, and how that can be mobilized. I think there's a bit of like a black box sometimes when we all sit together in the same room and just like talk about things. There's not much kind of like disclosure on those powers or capacities. And I've been also, I'm also part of a high-level panels of experts of the Committee on World Food Security, doing a report on urban food systems and strengthening urban food systems. And from there, we're also seeing what type of like mechanisms will help kind of like urban food governance to move forward. And I think there's something to be said about thinking about how rights-based approaches, right to the city, right to food, can help us inspire how we relate to each other in new structures, in new spaces, how that affects living labs, what are the values behind it, the interests, how we make them more reflective. And there's very interesting work from many academics all over the world that are trying to see how we make those spaces kind of like productive and like power aware, so more transformative in the mid and long term.
Yeah, very valuable elements. I see Beatrice also is ready to go.
Yes, I had a thought that links up a little bit with the idea of a paradigm, that we need a paradigm shift. And it might sound strange coming from a researcher, but I think that we also programmed previously to think about or to focus on a cognitive level, a rational level, linear level. How can we approach this, numbers, technology, and so on and so forth. But I think we often forget or undervalue the emotional and sensory approach to this. And food is a great medium to actually experiment with this. And through our experience, we've learned if you want to convince or like bring this topic closer to other people, sometimes the rational argumentation doesn't win, but an emotional and sensory way can actually win over the most critical people about it. And so to get engaged, to focus on the practices, may it be cooking together, something easy like that. But in the end, the transformation needs to be done by people, not by robots or technology, but by people. So have an empathetic, people-centered approach that, yeah, that speaks to the hearts of the people. And we also heard from Ostende, but also other contexts, like Copenhagen, motivation is key. like motivate the people, have incentives, not penalize them, not for bad behavior, but motivate them financially or with technical assistance, with access to markets, and empower them. And once they have the feeling, I can do something, this is such a big job we all have to do. It's a complex thing. But once you have this feeling, I've achieved something, you get the energy to continue, because as we've heard, this is gonna last for a long time.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing emotions back on the agenda. And of course, we'll be speaking about citizen-driven food system transformation, extremely important in the next panel. Margaret, do you have anything to add on this specific topic?
Yeah, just something to Beatrice said, because sometimes when you lack the motivation and you have a feeling like nothing is working, is just a very practical advice I've learned from the project. It's like working with other FOs, working with other cities, had showed that we are all working on similar topics, and some of us has already found the solutions that we are looking for. So sharing the knowledge with other cities, with our FO, is very, very helpful. So that's the outcome of the project as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We're all for practical advice. Today is all about having inspiration from other projects, seeing what works in some place, being able potentially to do the same thing at our level, at our city. So thank you for reminding that. We have time for at least one question from the audience, hopefully two. So Lena will be conveying it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for all the questions. We have a lot coming in, so I'm sad that we can't answer all of them now, but we will make sure to answer them in the FoodSHIFT Plus newsletter, so please subscribe to that one. But the number one question is for Alexandra, actually. So what is the best way that we can all contribute to that a food system approach is integrated into the agricultural policy of the EU and ensure that the farm to fork strategy and the legislative framework for sustainable food systems is not put on hold? So what can we all do?
I love this question because this means that there is support for our work and what we have done, which I believe, I really believe in this legislation and this future proposal, because it would mean that there is a commitment to change and to transform the food system and to engage all actors. What we need, taking into account the current situation and the so-called polarization of views that maybe some of the proposals of the Green Deal or the farm to fork strategy have created. I think that it is important to be vocal about it, to show the benefits and present this proposal as an enabler of the transformation, an important enabler for this transformation, and actually address this request not only to the EU authorities at high level, but also member state level, and also spread the news, I would say, and collaborate with all parts of the food chain to make sure that we have seen, just to say that one of the first deliverables of the farm to fork strategy was a voluntary initiative, a code of conduct. We deliver a code of conduct that we had to prepare. We led the work, but actually to seek commitments from the middle part of the chain, but actually we worked with all stakeholders from the farm to the fork, all the food chain, and also think tanks, academics, to work on voluntary commitments. So I was very proud and very glad to see so many different stakeholders sitting around the table, having for 6 months, 3 meetings per week, and they all agreed on the objectives. They all signed, including the farming community. So in terms of approach, collaborative approach, it is a very good example of goodwill. It was difficult at the beginning when we started to work on this. I had the Food Ring Europe saying we will never manage, and we managed. So when there is goodwill, and I see that we have collaboration also between private actors, I think this is also a great sign.
Yep, thank you, Alexandra. We have time for one little tiny more question. Tiny.
Okay, so number 2 for all the panelists. How do you view the food environment and the role of food policy and regulation? So a recent study, for example, showed that in the Netherlands, 40% of the population wants to eat more healthy, but finds it too hard with the current food environment and its temptations. And 20% say that it can't afford it. So food environment, what can we do about it?
Short answers, because that could be a book. But anyone want to take the floor on food environments? Beatrice, please.
Well, I can share an example of an initiative we did a month ago in Berlin and in several neighborhoods. We actually, with a participatory mapping, we mapped food environments of the people. And we involved them and asked them, for instance, what you would wish that's missing, but also what may have been there previously that you remember that's not there anymore. And through this participatory mapping, we really developed a collective idea of a food environment coming from the needs of the people that also showed gaps that we didn't think of, and summarized this into a nice report. And that material can now be communicated to the politicians to communicate it at higher level and say that's what's missing, that's what needs to be done. And if you start with the ideas and the needs and the interests of the people, it's also easier that it will be used later, that it's an effective solution or approach response.
Also interesting to look at, what is not there anymore. It's a nice
Exactly.
yeah.
Like quite often, one of the most missing things were like cafes or like spaces to encounter for engagement, not just to go there and shop and have an economic exchange between an item and money, but building relations between people. That was said that this was missing a lot.
Interesting. Anna, shortly, please.
Yes, I will just echo Beatrice, because I think there's a lot of evidence on food environments and there's a lot of studies, but I think the importance of looking at doing community food assessments and looking at the lived experience of food environments is essential, and it's not that easily taken up in policy making. And we have many examples out there of like how to intervene in food deserts or food swamps, like initiatives, for example, in terms of like promoting the opening of supermarkets with kind of like fiscal or other types of incentives. But then when we dig a bit deeper into that, we see that for example, the impact of New York of opening 20+ supermarkets hasn't really addressed inequities in access to fresh fruit and vegetables. So first, we need to evaluate better, because many times we put initiatives out there, but the evaluation is not there or that accessible. And second, I think like building on lived experience and making that something that policymakers can act upon, because that translation is not that easy. So many times I think is essential as well.
Sure, quickly though, please.
Can I share one thing that came out that connects really well to food environments? And you also mentioned the term food desert, which I like to avoid actually, because it makes it sound like it's a natural phenomenon, but it's human-made. It's a structural problem. It's not a food desert. It's an underprivileged or an underserved neighborhood. And we also have to be careful about our terminologies, because the words, the terms, the narratives we use structure also realities. And yeah, it's not a natural phenomenon. It's a power issue.
I agree, but I think humans were making deserts now as well. So maybe we have to.
Okay, thank you for the great questions to the from the audience. Really great to get the conversation going. So as a last thing, what I would like to ask from all speakers in 1 minute is to give a certain optimistic outlook. What are you working on that gives you hope? What do you want to do? A call to action, a call for collaboration? In 1 minute, please, Max. And I'll start this time from the other side. Margareta, please.
Right now we are working on, well, it's a part of food policy, but we have another project that it's called Fair Local Green Deal. So it's implementing a Green Deal in local level. And we've had series of workshops with all stakeholders involved in the process. And what we want to achieve is to actually, hopefully it's going to happen next week. We've been working on it's a kind of deal or manifesto that we want to include all the stakeholders, and we all make a commitment. So it's not only because we've had this whole process and we've learned that people won't change, they are aware of it, but the problem is that they expect that the municipality will do the job. What we want to do, we want to reverse this. So we want to make everyone to take part in this process and make a commitment. It could be a small one, but we want to involve all the stakeholders in this process. So it's our goal for the next time, month or week, actually.
Yeah, in my work, what I'm focusing on also in the future is actually building up agroecological networks. That starts with the idea of agroecology as a movement, as a practice, as a science, as a political approach, and connecting city regions, the hinterlands and the consumers in the city, and conceptualize it or understand it better as a urban-rural continuum and not as a separate rural place and urban place, and not look at individual initiatives, but really as a network, and start with farm level practices, landscape perspective, regional perspective, considering the social and governance components, and really shift like the system. And we also made a movie about it in the Berlin-Brandenburg region. It's called Seeds of Change, Tracking the Food System Transformation. There is in the stalls also a poster for it if you're interested in it. But yeah, agroecological food networks.
So I suppose that in terms of like positive things, yes, we've been in the last months building up FARO, this Food Action and Research Observatory, and it has been like very well, it has been very inspiring how many people have approaches that want to like work in this way, from civil society, from the public administrations, and also from academia. So I do think that, as you were saying before, people want change, and there's that energy there. So we just have to keep on working and making it happening. So that's what we will be working on in the next years.
So from my side, I must say that working the last 4 years on the implementation of the Green Deal and on very transformative initiatives have been an experience, because you see that when you try to change things or to create paradigm shifts, there is a lot of resistance. So this can be very frustrating, and there have been many moments of frustration. But after 4 years, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the fact that some may say that there are still pending initiatives, there is polarization, there is opposition, what gives me hope is that the way the involved actors are now thinking and speaking about sustainability of the food systems and this transformation has changed. When I remember how we started the discussions and where we are today, the level of maturity of involvement, it gives me a lot of hope. And I see that among the different stakeholders in Brussels, but also at member state level. What we are discussing today gives me also hope. The discussions that we have also with member states on the public procurement is also very hopeful, because we see that cities are really very involved in the sustainability and the sustainable public procurement. Thank you.
Great. I mean, I cannot add anything to the excellent conclusions of these speakers. A huge round of applause to all of them. Thank you for the practical insights and also the hope going forward.
I'll just broke in the middle there. We're going to have a very, very quick change, technical pause, if you will, for the next panel to come on. And then we're going to be right back. So no moving, no breaks. Next panel.
Sure. Okay. So I think Anna from the previous panel really made the bridge to this panel saying people want change. How do we get people involved? How do we get citizens involved? So this panel is all about citizen-driven food system transformation, and particularly how we can better empower citizens to participate in their food system and be an active part of this transformation. And FoodSHIFT has played a very important role here. FoodSHIFT empowers citizens to influence how food is produced, distributed, consumed, and recycled as well. And the idea is really to launch an ambitious citizen-driven transition of the European food system. You can find the Citizen Empowerment Scheme online via the toolkit, and you can read more about the partnership with Citizen Lab and check out the Choose Your Own Adventure Canteen campaign from the Copenhagen Lab. So it is not a coincidence that most of our speakers are involved in FoodSHIFT, given the topic of this this panel. So let me introduce to you Danielle Wild. She works on the Fosili project on sustainable food transitions. She's a professor at the University of Southern Denmark and Umeå University in Sweden. We have Martin Krivits from FoodSHIFT2030 Citizen Empowerment IP Leader, a postdoc researcher at ILVO. Maud Boisier from FoodSHIFT Barcelona Fall Innovator. She is co-founder of the Domingo Club. Raluca Barbu, so you were not in the, they are switched. Raluca Barbu from FoodSHIFT, also the Brazov Fall Leader. She's co-founder of Highclere Consulting. And Sally Bourdon from the Barcelona Fall Secretary. She's a researcher at the Fab Lab Barcelona. So I'll start first. No, you will start. But again, let me remind you about Slido for our questions to address at the end of this panel. Now let's start also for you. So the format will always be the same with speed challenges. What is, in 1 minute, something that you're working on at the moment, a challenge that you're facing at the moment, and that is relevant for this panel that you would like to bring to our audience?
Thank you. Look, the foundation of what I'm doing at the moment is looking at the fact that if you can't imagine it, it's very difficult to do something. So I look at cultures and imaginaries and practices, and I look at how they interplay with the governance structures and the sustainability advice that shapes the policies that are put in place. And if we look at sustainability advice, it really operates at the planetary and the bioregional level. That shapes policies, and we have this kind of top-down, very rational process. The first IPCC report drew on 1,690 papers on climate change. The latest one earlier this year drew on more than 300,000. But the growth in the amount of data on climate change actually maps almost identically to the growth in CO2 in the atmosphere. So data isn't really the answer. We need to upstream. I want to build on what Beatrice said in the previous panel. We need to upstream the messy, poetic, lovely, weird strangeness of what it is to be human and to live in the world into our policy processes, so that rather than have an enormous, unfathomable kind of gap and job of interpretation to try to map policy to practices, we can approach it in a slightly different way. And I think there's a lot of really good work being done in those directions. And in my labs, I'm in 2 universities, and what we do is we use food and embodied engagement with the materiality of what is at stake to help us imagine and connect practices and policies in new ways, so that that interpretation can be a little bit more realistic, so that the citizens who are also developing the advice and the policies can also be enacting environmental citizenship, being agents of change who can influence societal structures in meaningful ways. So agents of change with systemic, not only personal, but local, regional and global impact.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Martin?
Yes, what I come to realize is one of the biggest challenges to include citizens and citizen engagement in food system transformation is the shift from thinking or seeing ourselves as consumers in the food system to seeing ourselves as citizens in the food system. Because if we think of ourselves, which I think predominantly do today, if we look at ourselves as consumers, we are passive customers that buy products that already have been produced by others, or we are the passive receivers of information that's being produced by governments or by others. And I think it's important to think about how can we make our ways of doing and our organizations fit to integrate this perspective of collective thinking, which is the basis of citizen engagement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So the challenge we are facing as innovators, it's maybe, I do agree with what you said, it's maybe put the citizen in another way of consumer, like not being only a consumer, but more a citizen. And what we try to implement and what we are facing is to give space and time for people to invest themselves in new way of taking part of the transition. So in consuming in a way, but in a more proactive way, I would say. And it's difficult because it's difficult to compete with what is done here and with everything that is ready-made for us, that it's always easier to take what it's like easy to access, but we want to, and we challenge this way of involving people in this transition.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I think what has been said already, and also by Beatrice Malgorzata before, this idea of like, I can do something. I think it's right now very hard to relate for many citizens to this idea of food initiatives or food innovation or food technology, because our imaginary of it, as Danielle was saying, is something so far away. It's, you know, making GMOs in a lab, or it's massive companies like Monsanto, and we're not seeing ways that we can really create localized approaches. And many food innovators and tech makers are not taking this localized approach of how can we create something that is meeting the needs of a community within that community and with the community's input. So coming from the background in the space of maker spaces and the maker movement, which is basically like do-it-yourself culture, do it with others culture, we really want to try to understand and showcase how maker spaces can help us to produce food locally and produce food initiatives, particularly through this localized and community approach.
Thank you, Raluca.
Hello, everybody. I'm coming from Romania, from southern Transylvania, and one of the challenge that we put on the table from the beginning is to have a transparent process of engaging citizens and to write policies. And ideally, these policies should be done following very local needs. It's also how to work with citizens to become more resilient. We've been strongly hit by two crises, just like you, but maybe in our case was a little bit closer to the war with Ukraine. And we've learned a lot. And I think resilience, indeed, what was saying earlier, it's a big word for the agenda today. I know, in a second. But also how to identify local leaders which are promoting cooperation, because I think we are lacking a lot of cooperation. We want, but we don't know how to work together. And I think we need facilitators, we need coaches, we need people to know how to put processes in place to help us to work with each other better and more constructive, and to accept that one person doesn't hold all the truth, and to know each other's roles in the society as well, because sometimes we think that we know more than the other one. So for the moment, I think that's from myself.
Thank you, Raluc, and thank you to all for this initial input, these initial sparks of thought, let's say. Some of you have mentioned that there's a need for new ways of taking part, of having citizens take part in this transition. Would you like developing on that? What are new ways? And I mean, don't be shy of being very practical to really give us concrete examples. I think at least Martin and
Yes, I think new ways are important for citizen participation, but there's also a thinking behind it. So as I was saying earlier, this shift from thinking as a food consumer to a food citizen is actually also a very practical thing, because we need to have a framing at the beginning of our meetings, of our workshops, of the places where we try to do food system transformation, that we put it on the table somewhere. What does it mean to be civic? And then I think if you try to answer that question, I would say at least that this is about reinvigorating, about re-strengthening the public sphere. And the public sphere is a place where you come together with citizens and you think about public affairs, you think about public issues. And let it be that the food system is a place where there are lots of public issues that are important to take up collectively. Like, how can we continue our food consumption lifestyle in relation to the agriculture that it's producing? How can we tackle deforestation? And it's linked to our food consumption of meat. How can we support farmers who are being pressured on their well-being? And I think if you ask this to people, if you show that there is a problem and that there is a need to address it, then this is the very first practical step to start any meeting, really, to start up citizen engagement, to think collectively and to think in the public sphere collectively about public concerns can be very empowering and can be very hopeful as well. Because today, there's a lot of individualism, and I think we need to collectively shift that awareness. And I have some practical ideas as well that are even more practical, but I can say it later.
So I'll come in with some practical things. And these practical things are driven by similarly philosophical questions around who we are, who are we, and who do we want to be, and how do we know things? And by raising these really fundamental questions about our existence, it can perhaps open up new ways of thinking through I think we can confidently say quite radical situations that we will be increasingly facing. When I talk about citizens, I think about everyone as being a global citizen. So some of the work we're doing with farmers in Colling, for example, on the Fusili project, is we're about to start a process where we provide tools for measuring soil and water quality. And what this does, we're using tools that have been developed by Earthwatch organization that they've been using with farmers in the Netherlands, and we're adapting them to the Danish situation. And what they've found is that because the farmers are through this, it's citizen science, and through these citizen science processes of measuring their own land, they become empowered around the decisions they're making, even as simple as if I move my crops 1 meter further away from the stream that's going through my land, I can have a radical impact on the quality of that stream. And these are very concrete, very situated, and very, changes that the farmer can make. And, questions around who we are critically important when we think about changing farming, because it's very hard for farmers who aren't already working agroecologically to shift the way they work, because it's not only their identity, the entire system is set up for them to continue working in the way they are. And it's a loss of identity as well as income, as well as structure, as well as, you know, a sense of what it is to be a farmer, to completely change what your family and your history have led you to understand that your role is in society. On a very different level, looking at the developers of sustainability advice, we're taking them through embodied processes to bring embodiment and embodied engagement with food, not just as something we eat, but as a tangible design material, as vital materiality, to think in new ways about how they are presenting the data that's shaping policy, etc. Because I think we can all agree that eliminating hunger is an incredibly worthy goal, but saying that isn't enough to help us know what to do on the ground. We need concrete things, and to be able to connect things to very small things like measuring the soil quality or water quality.
Yeah, thank you, Martin and Danielle, for that. Would you like to add anything on this topic? I do have those more questions, so we can also. Raluca.
On how more practical we can be. I can share what we've done, because in our case, food was not on public agenda, and I'm working on rural development policy for 20 years, and just as we were discussing in the previous panel, it takes a paradigm shift for all of us, and it was about how to communicate, connecting rural with urban suddenly. It's how to bring the producers more closer to the citizens and to consumers in the city. So we had the municipality engage in opening one of the central markets to start organizing tasting sessions and to invite citizens to get to know their producers. Which was a major concern during the COVID breakdown, because suddenly with all the shelves empty in the supermarkets, everybody was wondering, where are you getting your food? Who is your producer? And suddenly they realized that Brasov is surrounded by producers, but citizens, they don't know their producers. So it's very much about how are we getting to know each other, but also besides facilitators, we need good communicators to break down the jargon of policy and research sometime to be easily understood by farmers, but also by citizens, and to help to connect them better. And food is the best way to connect them. So we organized these sessions in the free market, and everybody was thrilled to get to know each other and to see where are their farms, if they can visit them, which was amazing experience for us. But also we organized a workshop with young people because we were interested to explore their perspective on food, and particularly how do they see themselves, but also their food in 20 years. And we've done a foresight exercise, and I can see here lots of young people. And we've learned a lot because maybe we are sometimes in our own bubble. And we don't see how much anxiety the nowadays discourse about climate, about scarcity of food, potential scarcity of food in the future creates among young people, and how it was challenging to hear them, to see them envisioning themselves and their families and how the food will be in 20 years. And I was so happy to hear that they see themselves cooking, that they can go back to some recipes of their grandmothers, which made us wonder, what about retro innovation? So just as Beatrice was saying, let's not throw the water with the baby. So in the name of innovate and find new ways, maybe to be careful and to maintain some good principles, but also to be careful not to over-engineer when it comes about food. Because I think we have the potential to go and complicate from policy to working with people, to over-engineer all the processes and to create a Babylon tower that is very difficult then to unpack. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
So I want to add something, what about you have saying, like with our project, we try to bring consciousness on natural processes and how citizens can take part in this food transformation journey. And we promote fermentation as which is not a new thing, but it's like how we can bring these old practices in new ways, in new paths. And so with that, we want that people have time to put themselves in this journey, has a meditation, has a way of being more conscious of what is food, what they are eating, and also with the product. Because if you do your own food, you want to use good product, and then you want to buy good product from your farmers locally with you, like bringing this way of thinking in your environment and take part in this journey. So that was I wanted to add.
Great. I want to, I mean, we could stay here for a long time on this topic. I just want to switch a tiny bit. I was curious because Sally, you spoke about the maker movement and food technology. So how do you, how can the maker movement engage citizens with, you know, food generally, but food technology specifically? Like, how have you done it?
Thank you, Sylvia, for the question. I think this is also a super nice question for Maud, who is an amazing food tech initiative maker with Antoine, who's in the audience. And I mean, I think, and this is kind of going with what we were saying before, of we don't have to, you know, remake everything or re-engineer. We used to have products that were made locally, and then we shared information about them. And it wasn't that, you know, you wanted to develop a food innovation, and in order to develop that, you had to prototype it first, and maybe the design was being done by you with someone in collaboration in Italy, and then the parts itself were sourced from India and Bangladesh and China, and then it was coming back to you in Barcelona to assemble it. And we want to kind of go back to that place before, where we were able to make our products more locally, and we see maker spaces and fab labs as a way to do this, not only for those that are, you know, the designers and tech makers, but putting this in touch with communities. If you are designing something locally, you're making it locally, that means that the people that are actually going to engage with that initiative, that or intervention, they are also nearby. So they can participate in co-design and co-creation processes to actually make sure that the intervention that's being created is going to meet their needs and going to actually respond to the challenges that they have, as opposed to, you know, someone very far away designing something and saying, okay, take it ready-made, and then you're, as a community, sitting there going, okay, well, how does, you know, this kind of meets my needs, but not completely. And we really think with the relocalization of production and making, this can be an amazing way that we are finding more like hyper-local approaches that are really taking into account the context of place, the context, cultural context, socioeconomic context, all of these different contexts that when you are designing and making so far from the communities that then are using your interventions, you really are not able to take into account.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. Maud, would you want to briefly add something to things?
I think makerspace can have a huge power also because it appears locally. So it's something that you can create in a local area and that you can make it real. You can test it with with the people around you, but it has also the power to be like sent all over the world. So because it's a network of fabrication laboratories that have the same tool. So if you send the files, like if you prototype something that is done in a fab lab in Barcelona, for example, it can be replicate in any other fab lab. And so what is interesting is that you can play in two levels, and you can make something and test it locally and then send it all over the world and see how it can be implemented in other other places using other materials, for example, other resources. So I think it's interesting and then you can grow from what others have made from other labs. So it's like a good evolution system, I think, in 2 levels.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very, very interesting. We are pressed for time again, but before asking you for your questions, I wanted to touch upon an important topic, especially today. So the socioeconomic question, right? With the wars at this point, with inflation, eating sustainably is not per se a priority of citizens. Unfortunately, it often can cost more. So also from a financial perspective, that's just not easy at the moment. So how do you address that in your work? How do you keep citizens motivated in this sense, also from a socioeconomic consideration? And this question is for whoever would like to take the floor.
I can perhaps say something about how the Food 2030 projects do it. I'm a work package co-lead on Fusili, and the work package I'm involved in is about supporting all 12 cities to develop their food living lab methodologies and roadmaps. And of course, it's different in every city, but what we also find is that in supporting the cities to learn from each other, we introduce them to a dynamic learning process that's come out of Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. The cities are learning how to learn from their own environments in new ways and to learn how to learn from each other. And some of the projects, like we saw FoodSHIFT has fellow cities, like fellow traveler cities, who then enable the project to think about, well, how can these, it's not about scaling up, it's not about getting bigger, it's about scaling deep and scaling out and working out how can other places adopt and adapt to their local conditions. And in Fusili, we find the 12 cities, they're very different and they're spread all over Europe. They include Kharkiv in the Ukraine, who have, in extraordinary circumstances, who have continued to work on food system transformation in a war. You know, so we see all of these diverse things and we find unexpected connections and opportunities and unexpected low-hanging fruit because we are sharing and building capacities in new ways of seeing what we have, sharing what we have, and then adopting and adapting and interpreting. It's not about translation, it's really about interpreting to other ways of being and living in other socioeconomic circumstances. So I think we can look to all 5 of the Food 2030 projects to get a lot of insight into what can be done in response to this challenge.
Yeah, thank you for that. Does anyone want to add on this very important topic?
Food is a social act. I think it requires a healthy ecosystem of relationships. And what we've learned is that when people are coming together, they find solutions together. And if I'm not wrong, I think it was the Harvard study, which is the longest study ever done, the research for over 80 years, which actually has studied the various elements that is influencing the quality of life of an individual, but also of a community. And it turned out that actually it's not health, it's not wealth, but it's the quality of relationships. So I think the more good quality relationships we cultivate at the city level, but also to start bridging more between cities and rural areas, to get to know the villages around, to get to know the producers, what the life of the producer, why local sometimes is more expensive, how much work it's behind. Okay, nobody stops you to go to the supermarket to get the cheapest, but maybe you should know the story behind that cheap product. I think it helps, and it's not just about motivation, because sometimes maybe we don't need to eat so much, but maybe this is another shift in paradigm that we need to operate. And yeah, building communities, I think it's very important. And yeah, we had a nice surprise to actually hear that the municipality in Brasov is planning for revamping one of the farmers markets. And we are lobbying hard to be a space for everybody, not to just sell products, but to have seniors coming and maybe doing their activities to connect with young people, to have also cooking sessions. And I think opening up spaces at the city level for such interactions, so to nurture relationships, it's what motivates people.
Yeah, thank you for this insight and for sharing again the importance of the quality of relations. So now up to your questions conveyed through Lena. We have time for at least one.
So the first one is actually something that you all touched upon, but it keeps on being upvoted, so it seems to be burning. So maybe can you just quickly give some examples, maybe even on how to engage vulnerable groups, low socioeconomic groups, but also maybe cultural minorities and alike. So maybe you have some practical examples of that.
Take the floor.
It's a very challenging question. I'll try to give an example of what we practically did in FoodSHIFT project. In FoodSHIFT project, we developed a citizen empowerment scheme. And there we had this two-step approach, actually asking people who are affiliated to a certain organization to take up a civic role related to a specific issue. So we applied it in, the people from Copenhagen lab applied it to the University of Copenhagen. And there was a two-step approach. The first step was to launch a survey to all the students and people working at the university, which addressed the procurement of the university. And it had a double role to first tell the people who go eat there daily about what it's all about, what is this procurement about, what are the ins and outs of it. We need to renew it every 2 years. How can we source more sustainable agriculture? How can we link between the procurement and the meals that we eat and the education within the university? And so the survey was launched and 140 respondents were there. But there was also a second element. It was not only educating, it was also asking, do you want to take up an active role in changing this procurement at the KU? And there about 40 people, citizens, said, yes, I would like to take up this role. So, and then the second step, and this is the most difficult one, is then how can you lead those people towards becoming co-facilitators of the change, in this case, the procurement? And so they're right now, actually next week, I think there's these user groups being set up where you have the procurement officers together with experts, together with people working or studying at the university who want to think about this change. And I think this is evolving towards organizations that increase their capacity to listen. So maybe we just should be more able to ask our citizens who are linked to our organizations, do you want to contribute to this problem? And I can give another example of a CSA farm in Ghent. And the farmer of the CSA has the problem that only middle-class people come to his farm. And he wants to give access of organic farming also to people who are less affluent. So what he did was, I don't have time to handle this, he said, but he asked his community, he asked the people that go and harvest there, what do you think about this problem? And right now, these citizens, he doesn't call them customers anymore, he calls them members of the CSA, are actually setting up a working group on how can we also include less affluent people to become member of the farm. So I think asking people is the first step.
Yeah, thanks. It doesn't get much more practical than that. That's great. I mean, I know Danielle want to take the floor. Do you also want to add something? Other way, quickly, yes, please.
I think as well, like as Martin was saying, going to communities, asking what their needs are, but also empowering them with the solutions they already have within their communities. I think so many times specifically when we're talking about initiatives, sometimes we have the tendency to go to a group that might be struggling and say, hey, we have the solution for you. And not only can that be very patronizing, but it's also like completely forgetting that these people also have their own forms of knowledge and a lot to contribute. And so going to them to say, maybe, hi, I have one, if you have funding, amazing. But two, like you can facilitate a co-creation process to help them be empowered with the knowledge that they already have and the practices that they might already have to continue what they're doing. I mean, when I was working on food systems research in the US, in Utica, which is in central New York, there were many migrants, especially from Somalia. And there was kind of this perception that they're not interested in eating healthy, but really so many people in this community had access to their own plots of land before. So it's not that they didn't have interest in eating healthy, it's just they were disjointed from the space they already had. So an initiative came and surveyed people from this population, said, okay, what do you need to be able to be eating more healthy and to be more engaged in your food system? And they all said land. And so the city was able to help put aside a set of land for them, and it led to this really vibrant community garden space. So I think it's really like going to these communities and asking what they need and facilitating that, not imposing on them.
Yeah, very inspiring. Okay, so great, thank you for all of this. Now comes the tricky part, where instead of in 1 minute, I will ask you to please summarize in 30 seconds something that you are optimistic about, a call to action, a call for collaboration, something that you want to convey to our audience. And of course, before I forget, please don't hesitate to continue these conversations in the lunch break and the breaks. We're here for this today. Danielle, 30 seconds.
Okay. Something that hasn't been brought up today is more than human relations. And these more than human relations are critters and creatures, but they're also roads and buildings and vehicles. And if we can think more relationally about the connections between all of the different elements that are part of our food system, which means part of our world, because the food system touches everything, then we can begin to find other ways, I think. And if we look to social movements, agroecological, peasant, other grassroots farming movements, and indigenous foodways, we can find those relational ontologies. And I think there is an enormous willingness and desire for us to actually gain some relationality in how we approach the world and the problems that we're dealing with. It's not a food chain, it's a complex web of relations, and we're not in the middle. You know, we're just in there somewhere, but we have extraordinary impact. So it's this relationality question.
Yeah, I would be very interested in any cooperation about who wants to work together on creating and reinvigorating the public sphere. So creating those places where we can collectively, besides our professional affiliations or backgrounds and across class, can try to discuss common concerns. And I think this is really a big challenge. And so anybody, because it's impossible to do alone as well. So it would be an invite for anybody who wants to think along about that.
You heard him. You can go to him if you're interested.
We, as with Domingo Club, we do open source tools for food fermentation, and we are looking for any kind of support. It can be like for collaboration, it can be using our tools, it can be buying our tools because we also sell it. So we want to just create new trends of caring our communities, of caring on health and our planet. And so we also organize workshops. We also, we also are happy to do any kind of collaboration.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, so I mean, from Fab Lab Barcelona's perspective, and representing a bit the maker movement, we're really curious how this movement can continue to support the food system transition and connect communities specifically to making the interventions that they need. And connect food tech and food initiative makers to communities. And we really want to invite all of you as well to consider how the maker movement, how maker spaces can actually be a site for food production and food intervention creation. And I'd really like to invite you all to explore the Git book, or this online book resource that we've developed, to better understand or continue understanding what are food initiatives and food tech that are coming out of makerspaces. What does that look like? How can the maker movement support this food system transition? And how can we support food tech makers and initiatives with community-driven approaches? Thank you.
Messages for the ones here in Brussels, please make sure that the farm to fork doesn't get compromised. We are counting on you. And we need an ambitious transformation of the food system. Don't hesitate if we can help from every country, from every region. Please consider a regional approach of food. We need to start working together, urban with rural, more, and merge the dots maybe with our neighbors, with our neighbor counties, and to create stronger food systems. Develop critical thinking, especially young people. Don't get anxious. I think I'm counting a lot on the future generations, and I have a son, and he suddenly said one day, I'm not sure I'm going to have a family because this world looks so, and after the discussion, he said, no, it's still a beautiful world, and good food and good nature and good people will always be out there. And we are working with small farmers and connecting them with the food systems in Brașov, but not just in Brașov, in Romania. So if you're interested in that, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
And find ways to remunerate agroecological farmers.
Yes, thank you to all for these really insightful elements. Raluca, I heard you. We are trying our best at EU level. It's just not really easy at the moment, but anything you can do at national level, regional level is absolutely great. The more EU level hears from the national level, we do want this, the more it becomes a reality. So thank you to all of our speakers again for your brilliant question. A huge round of applause again.
We're on time. Thank you to everybody. Great moderation. We're halfway, so there's still plenty more to come. I would like to give just a brief introduction to the lunch and a brief introduction to my colleague from IFOAM Organics Europe. Alba is the lead organizer for this event, and she will introduce the lunch for us.
Thank you, Luke. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. So the food that we have today is from Slurps. They are an organic catering in Brussels, and they focus on responsible food. They're concerned about the health and the well-being of humanities, animals, and the future of the planet. So all the food is vegan, organic, and there's going to be a meal for each person, as far as I know. Also, the food provided during the break and later in the reception is also from Slurp. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Alba. Lunch. We'll be back here at 1 o'clock sharp. 2 o'clock sharp.
That sounds great, Alba. Gwenda, how are you doing up there? All right, got some good Twitter pics, X pics. All right.
Okay. It's time. Please take your seats. Too bright. Oh. Okay. Does anybody have a problem with the lights? Are they good? Good. Okay. Ready. Last panel. Lucky last. I have two quick reminders. One, for those of you that are registered for the event tomorrow, keep your name tags. You have to wear it for the rest of the night, I guess. The second one was people are asking about where we're going to share the resources. In the program, and another plug, shameless self-plug, in the program on the last page, here it is. This is the one I had. There's a QR code and a sign-up link for the Rise Up Food Shift Plus. No, that's it. Oh, thanks. And also, if you can't find it, it's these posters, and I'm going to leave it up the front here. So all of the questions, all of the presentations, all of the sound bites will come on this email chain. Okay.
Thank you, Luke. And welcome to this last panel of today. I hope you have had a nice break and you're very refreshed for this session, which will be about city regions and living labs, again, for long-term food system transformation. And we'll try to delve a bit more deeply into the question of how can future city regions activate, implement, and continue this transformation. In terms of FoodSHIFT outputs, I think what you'll find very interesting is the transition toolkit, which provides users with inspiration, resources, guidelines, and tools for understanding and contributing to the food system transition. It provides interactive resources to support food system transition across 4 key impact areas, which we've heard about already before: citizen empowerment, job creation, sustainability, and governance. So as for the panel before, we will be giving more time for the Slido questions. So please, again, I'm not going to repeat it. You have the QR code. Please write your questions. And I would like to introduce our 5 speakers of today. We have Anya De Cunto. She is head of food at Eurocity. Daniela Lutz. She is policy officer at the Commission in DG RTD. Dirk Washer from FoodSHIFT. He's innovation manager, but you've heard from him in the beginning. He needs no introduction. Henk Renting. He is lecturer and researcher on urban food systems at RUAF, and Kathy Belpaim. Sorry?
No, I don't work at RUAF anymore. I have worked with RUAF, but now I work with Eres University of Applied Sciences.
Okay, apologies for that. I had the wrong information. Thank you for correcting. No worries. And Kathy, she is the FoodSHIFT Ostend FAO leader, food policy officer in the city of Ostend. So you know the drill, most of you know the drill for how we start this panel. What I would like to ask you is in 1 minute, if you could give us the speed challenge, the so-called speed challenge. So what are you working on that you would like to mention that is relevant in the context of this panel? What is a challenge that you're working on and that you'd like to mention? Please, let's, Anya first.
I chose the wrong seat, but yeah, to start. So I don't only work at Eurocities, which is a network of cities, but I also have the pleasure to work for one of the sister projects of FoodSHIFT2030, which is Food Trails, where we work on very similar challenge and we have very similar methodology and outcome. So FoodSHIFT is our daddy because they started the year before us. But I think the first thing I would like to mention are two challenges, if you allow me. First of all, yeah, I think you're all very much aware of the role of cities for food system transformation, but it's something that I have to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat constantly. Because if we think about cities and food, it's mainly, yeah, a couple of citizens around a tomato plant. This is what people think, and absolutely. And the second thing is that even if cities do fantastic work, it's too small scale. It involves a very limited number of citizens, not really the hardcore. And usually it is in a very, like especially this experience of the Living Lab, it will be too small to really having any impact in the food system. So this is the challenge we are currently facing. How do we move from micro to macro?
Okay, not a small challenge. Jörg.
Okay, thank you. You know a little bit what I'm working at, you know, from Outsus Metro, planning and research office in the Netherlands. I'm busy with the innovation management of these partners of these living labs. And the whole thing about living labs and working with innovators is about creating linkages and getting into touch and really having a concrete connection with the real world. And that is really, I think, the change in the last 10, 15 years that the EU is going away from the pure research-driven approach to the multi-stakeholder approach. That's great. However, we see and realize there is a need for a really specialization and for creating targeted links, because these innovators are specialized and they deserve and require specialized answers. So this is something where we need to just kind of be aware of and tune into this type of special need. And that's not that easy. And the second is referring to the discussion from before. We miss really sometimes the big gorillas in the room, the big companies, those which are always on the other side. And it doesn't make sense that we operate in niches and in a parallel universe, but that we somehow bridge this gap. And so this is challenge enough, I think.
On really challenging challenges. Daniela.
Yes, so I'm Daniela Lüth. I work with urban food system transformation projects in Horizon 20 and Horizon Europe. And what we've seen there is one that actually was already mentioned. So we have a lot of good examples, really great, fantastic ideas on the ground. And what we need to do now is to scale, to replicate, to network, to use what is already there in other places and also deploy it so it works in different places. Cities looks very different, regions look very different. And let me add a second point in my second half of the minute is we talk a lot about food systems, but we have to tangibly really apply a systems approach. And that means not to only have diets that are healthy and sustainable, but we also need to look at circularity, climate smartness, and really including citizens. And when I say including citizens, really all citizens to be really inclusive. So we really need to bring these all together. It doesn't make things easier, but that's the way forward, I believe, that really brings us to real transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Henk?
Okay, so my name is Henk Renting. I first want to say a little bit more about myself. Well, it was already wrongly put, but not completely wrongly put, that I worked with RUAF. RUAF Foundation, with that I worked a lot on city region food systems and urban food policies. I was involved in developing the Milan Food Policy Pact, and after that I worked with a network of cities in the Netherlands, City Deal Food on the Urban Agenda. Now I work with Erasmus University of Applied Sciences as teacher in a master on food system innovation, and also involved in research projects that are relevant for this. One is a project that works with food system labs in Africa called Healthy Food Africa. And another is a project working on urban agriculture, European Forum on Urban Agriculture. My challenge, the challenge I think I see as the biggest one is the question, how can the bottom-up innovations and policy arrangements that emerge from cities, city regions, how can they be consolidated and linked to policies at higher level, country policies, European policies?
Thank you, Henk. And Kathy.
Yes, hello, my name is Kathy. I work for the city of Ostende. So I'm going to look at my city scale also, although it's quite small. Well, the challenge, I think, in FoodSHIFT, we did a lot. We were able to do really a lot in this 3.5 years now that I've been working on it. We established a food strategy, and of course that was wow. And yeah, you have your council approving it. So you have the politician who's responsible. So this is all a wow factor. We saved on food waste in our central kitchen. But I already said when we had the food strategy approved, this was the easy part. So, you know, to be honest, writing strategic objectives and those X number of operational objectives, that's not the hard part. Of course, you have to do it with your stakeholders and everything, but that's not the hard part. It's then starting to go into action and getting everyone with you to do it, because it's not our city alone that me alone is going to do it. It's everyone in the food system. So I think that's the biggest challenge. I'm not going to say speeding it up, but we had the low-hanging fruit now. So going from this low-hanging fruit to much bigger changes in the longer term, that's the challenge.
Okay, thank you to all of you. So I heard micro, macro, bottom up, scale up. So I guess you gave myself the question to ask you. Gave me the question to ask you. So you're among those that are best placed to sort of give an answer to the challenges you have raised. What have you learned in terms of how do we actually scale up the work that you do at city level at a higher level, be it regional, national, EU? How do we put it into policies? Easy question. I mean, please just take the floor and even talk, you know, after each other, like.
Maybe just to start, I mean, in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, we do a lot of good things. I think this FoodSHIFT is one excellent example, and many other projects who work on it. Now, what we've seen is there also a project has a certain lifetime, there's a limited budget, and then sometimes things end. And so under Horizon Europe, we have these 49 partnerships, which are really strategic undertakings for a time frame of 7 to 10 years with a very different budget. And that really try to accommodate, to work together with all member states to speed up deployment, to speed up multi-actor approach, and work more strategically together on different ends. And one of the partnerships is the Sustainable Food Systems Partnership that will actually start early next year for a lifetime of 7 to 10 years with a total budget of around 500 million. So you have a different capacity to work on these things on a broader scale than one project can do. So that's one way of how Horizon Europe approaches this, that food systems is one of the 49 partnerships, just shows it has been seen this is important to use a partnership of that scale to really work on it more strategically. Thank you.
Yeah, in Food Trails, we are trying these approaches. So we had living labs or FAL, like in FoodSHIFT, but now our living labs are coming to an end, and now we are asking all the local authorities to also move towards food policy. or updating their food policy if they already had one. So this is the way for us to try to ensure that indeed the work can advance and it doesn't end with the timeline of the project. Something else we will now moving towards to is indeed inviting those cities that were involved in food trails to also speak with either regional or national government. And again, we know that there are a variety of differences across. We also have living labs across Europe. So we come from the experience of French cities that they already have a quite advanced collaboration with the national government, and instead entities like Tirana kind of starting from scratch. Okay, where do I start? What is my entry point? So these are kind of the two tools we are trying to use to make sure that after year 4 of the project, not everything will just fall apart and end.
Yes. Well, I first of all, I want to say that I think it's very impressive, the work that has been done in the food system labs of FoodSHIFT, but also of other projects of the food family. And I think that's really very useful, and it well, it visualizes and it expresses how powerful and how important this approach is of working more well, transversal, integrated on food systems and on food policies. That being said, I see that still increasingly the continued sectoral way of working at the level of higher governments, it continues to be a problem. And it is also restricting the work what cities can do. And I think it's very important for that to work more towards partnerships between cities and national governments, maybe also partnerships between cities and European government. I don't know, maybe also why not a food system lab at that level? If that works like integrating, why not? And just to give some example, for example, the topic of food environment that was already mentioned sometime, which is clearly a very important area of action where cities can and want to do something because it's very urgent. In the Netherlands now, cities are working on that, but cities find out that in fact they miss the legal instruments to do something with that. They are not allowed to say in their spatial policies, well, here we forbid that there is a fast food chain because it's not legally allowed. That's something that local government cannot resolve. That is something that can only be done by legislation at national level. But there are more examples like this also we come across in our project that we are involved in on urban agriculture, the European Forum on Urban Agriculture, that lots of things is happening in cities within urban food systems where urban agriculture has a role. Actually, it's also even highlighted in policies and narrative of, for example, the farm to fork approach. But if you start looking into policy, urban agriculture is never explicitly mentioned. So there is a mismatch between what is happening from the ground and what is articulated in policy. And I think that's a very urgent area to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I would like to follow up on Daniela's input on the, let's say, prospects of the Sustainable Food System Partnership. Obviously, in Clever Food and under Food2030, we're also establishing collaborative network in this respect. I would opt for some high level of synergy between these efforts, because our partners in these countries, in the different institutions, etc., they are of course becoming just flooded with these types of invitations and possibilities. And always the question is, what's in it for me? So we put lots of energy in to demonstrate at the side of these forthcoming networks, to demonstrate the added value. But this is something we should exchange about very much, because that's managing our resources. That's basically the same topic like managing the nature and the environmental resources is managing our knowledge resources. And if we don't do this properly, we lose it. They just kind of turn their back to us because they feel that's kind of a mess. I haven't heard something for half a year, there's no result, or I can better look into Wiki. No, we need to make sure that the food, let's say the transition toolkits or whatever we have is really top of the line, and people know, here I find it, and not, 10 seconds Google search. Thank you.
Just to respond to that, many thanks, and absolutely agree. So we don't want to duplicate anything, and the partnership definitely comes with a mandate to make sure to be aware of everything that is happening and work complementarity. In complementarity, we still will have, of course, the Horizon Europe work program with different calls and projects and living labs. So the partnership really has the mandate to bring this all also together and to make sure everyone is on the same page and works together.
There is another partnership starting up. Is the Urban Agenda on Food led by DG Regio, because also one of the things there is, I hope there are not too many people from the European Commission, but what they like to do is duplicate. So we're going to have maybe extra group from DG Santé and DG Regio coming in. So I would love for this urban partnership also to collaborate with a sustainable food system, but it's something that sometimes it's hard. The European Commission is a big group, so I really hope you can help us there.
Okay, anything to add on this question? I see a lot of people where, Kathy, please. Oh, no, you don't. Okay, great. So needed this question also of policy coherence, not duplicating. We see a lot of, at the moment, especially in terms of policy coherence, you have the farm to fork strategy, but then some things are not necessarily aligned with the farm to fork strategy. So that's, you're giving examples of that. So before I give the floor to our audience, I just want to ask one more practical question. We have been speaking, more a bit, how do we scale up? But let's talk about something practical that is, for instance, relatively easy to implement at home. And how can a city region support this? How can it upscale it within, let's say, the city region? What is the role of a city region in this? And perhaps, Kathy, you have an example of something you did in Ostend and how it could be upscaled in a house, in a household, even.
In a household, I have to think about that one, but maybe I think I kind of give an example. But first, I would like to start somewhere else. We started with, of course, our city. We are not a big city, 72,000 inhabitants. In summer, 300,000 tourists. But we have this, what we call the food savers. It's I think a system many of you know, where you go and pick up excess food from different companies or supermarkets or whatever. And I think that's a very nice example where we as a city can play a role for the city region, because instead of doing this food saver system only for our city, we immediately reached out to the cities surrounding us and say, look, we've got this infrastructure. Our city invested in very good infrastructure, in cooled transport, in learning skills for people in employment trajectories. So we have the staff for it, and we can help you out to have a better food aid program. So we are doing this for the region, not only for our city. And I think you can do that with several also on short supply chain kind of projects. You can work for the region from within your city. And in terms of household examples, I think the best example there and very practical is the food waste. Silke was saying it during a reception, my politician, that because of us working so intensely with our central kitchen on the food waste reduction, the whole team became so enthusiastic, and then they won this award and they won this other award for Bagomio, that also the people working in the team of the kitchen, they would normally never care about, because for them it was like, oh yeah, this is wasted. And if you, I don't know, if you waste 10 kilograms of something on production of 200 kilograms, it seems very small to them. But now they realize it is not small, and they start to think at home about their food waste, and they talk about it to everyone. So they are nearly obsessed by food waste. It was very funny to see. We also have our own too good to waste system within the city council. If our things are left over, we have this, it's not an app, but there's a system that we can take the excess food home if we pay for it and stuff like that. So, and they're constantly thinking about new things to do it, and you can apply this at home. So that's maybe an example.
Yeah, thank you. That was sort of the thing I was looking for, something practical. If anyone else has something to add on this, please go ahead. Yeah, Dirk.
Well, you know, from the same line of Living Lab experiences, I think we all remember well our trip to Avignon when we saw the different approaches. And it was very fascinating and touching to see how the city had managed to just bring together the urban activities and the rural activities. We went out to the farmer who was just kind of establishing an ecological farming. One person where we immediately think, well, how is this possible that this person manages almost alone? But being in close touch with the management of the city, the procurement activities, people know each other. The meat from there goes directly to the schools. The school children learn about where the meat comes from. And this was exactly this like picture book example, which we would like to see, of course, happening much more often. Right? Often we talk about how to bridge the gap between the countryside and the city. But in Avignon, we could really see it. And also waste food being just used for having soups and organic and biological products. And it was really a big network evolving over the last 4 to 5 years. And yeah, more of this, of course.
Yeah, it's again that importance of the human relation that we sometimes miss, you know, so that we spoke about already in a previous panel. Would any of you like to add more on this question? Yeah, please, Hank.
Yeah, well, maybe one example from the Netherlands that is not so known outside the Netherlands, but which I think is also something that would be very interesting and to replicate is this network, the city deal network, where different cities exchange their experiences in different policy fields, some on short food supply chains, some on the policies that they do for food environment in their cities, and which is mostly a network of exchange between cities, a peer-to-peer network, you might say, and where they really do visits together, look in each other's kitchen, and you can really see how their real practical lessons of how cities organize their policies around these areas, how they learn from each other. And sometimes it's not a 100% replication, but it's really a learning community. I think that is an approach that following on localized food system labs could add something and can really be used more.
Yeah, thank you, Hank. Okay, no, Daniela wants to add. Go for it.
Yeah, just a very quick one, because we recently had the info days for the Horizon Europe Cluster 6 work program 2024. And there is a call open on how to improve or how to facilitate eating, cooking and treating of food at home and wasting food. So that's really a call that was co-created also in strong collaboration with DG Santé, where there was the need seen to actually make a change with the consumer or the citizen as the consumer directly at home. So there is a call open, I believe, until February. So if anyone is interested and has good ideas on that, that's the moment now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I would like to now give the floor to you through Lena. Go for it.
You slowed a little bit down, so please do upvote your questions that you find most interesting. I don't know if it's the topic or the timing of day, but we do have a few questions. So first one coming up, cities can't do everything. So this links again to citizens. What are the 2 or 3 things that we should all be doing that have the most impact at the local level?
I disagree. It's not citizens that have to do everything. It's government that have to put citizens in a position to have easy access. So again, this topic of food environment. And every time we talk about citizens being it, they have to eat healthy, they have to eat plant-based, they have to eat organic, they don't have to waste. We end up always in this paternalistic, yeah, we are going to tell them what is best for them. And I really don't like it. And I think many cities, indeed, what they want to do is collaborate with the regional government or where necessary, the national government to say, okay, it's not up to them to make the best decision. It's up to us to give them the environment where the best decision, the best for the environment and for health is easy to access. So I'm sorry, I didn't like that question because it comes a lot up and I was like.
That question. Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, then I misunderstood us. I thought we as in like us, all of us.
Apologies for that. So maybe can you repeat the question?
Yes. So cities can't do everything. What are the 2 or 3 things we, as cities, should all be doing that have the most impact at the local level? But I like the answer anyway.
Well, maybe just to recall, we have this a nice thing which is called the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, where there is a framework of action with possible activities of cities can do. I think there are 37, so it's more than 3 anyway, but headed under 5 different topics. But if I would, if what I see and where cities really can make meters, let's say, is the topic of eating habits in relation to health is clearly a topic which is very close to city. Also, health services is something very close to the city. But then more than just giving information, but also have tools to do something with how food is offered, provided, etc. And linked to that, I think cities can also do much more with the topic of food sourcing in different ways, in promoting urban agriculture, in organizing food hubs, in being more active in how retail is organized in a city, which sometimes needs maybe other instruments, but I think cities can do a lot. And food waste, I think, is also a very obvious topic, and where also really a lot is happening.
Yeah, please, Catherine.
I would like to add one important one, because I remember when I was preparing to, to have the discussions on writing the food policy for Ostende, I was reading some papers, critical papers by NGOs who looked at the other food strategies. And actually at that time, that was 2020, they said in nearly none of them, it says we need space for food production. Yeah. And also there, cities can do something. I don't know, some of you might have followed the discussions in the city of Ghent, where the city of Ghent had a lot of still public lands that they were selling. And unfortunately, like in Ostende, we don't have this, it was the public lands for UCMW, how do you say that, social services, that had land that was used by farmers. But we do have our agro park. It's not extremely large, but I think cities can also play a role in buying land if it is an opportunity. They don't have to do this. Is not the only strategy, but it's especially not selling land for farmers that want to farm but don't have the possibilities because land is too expensive. So I think besides all what you've mentioned, I think it can also be much more ambitious.
Yeah, Dirk, please.
Yeah, but briefly, yet the procurement mentioned before is, of course, a field where the cities are already taking an active role. We have seen impressive examples, and where many cities still commission this out and hand this over to companies. Of course, you can also, require the company to be very engaged. But the examples we know, we have seen that just when the city themselves is the driver and really watches out and establishes these linkages, that this really works well. Because an external company just can still decide, well, this is too much, we stop with this. But and it takes some time, so you need some longer breath. It's not like just starting and everything falls into its place. These are people who work very hard and very long with their own resources on this, but then it's the more rewarding. And of course, it shouldn't be a model for the future that you have to exhaust yourself about everything. So hopefully support is there nationally or internationally, but it takes really the conviction and drive of people.
Maybe just briefly following this, both for land and procurement, something that we are seeing cities are doing more and more is creating either formal or informal network, like in Italian particularly, they're called tavole del cibo. So you have a bigger cities that is kind of central and brings together, like Kati was saying, all the different entities around. They can either create a legal kind of entities that they can access also access to the Common Agricultural Policy Fund, the rural funds, and then ideally linking this with the Regional Development Fund and European Social Fund. And this is something that more cities are exploring in addition to all the other, what I call more traditional work like procurement, tackling food waste. And this also is not only then making land available, but in particular making land available to specific type of farmers, which connects to what said before, either organic farmers or young farmers, that now it's also a little bit of a challenge on how to support them. So yeah, it would be fantastic to see more of this governance example, which can be formalized or informalized, and really in particular linking rural funds, common agricultural policy and regional development funds so they don't go in sclerotic line of work.
Yes, if I can follow up, I think you mentioned, you referred to the CAP. I think this is really a very good example where there are more possibilities to combine local food strategies, policies with CAP measures, CAP policies. And now it's, well, also because of reasons for eligibility, that, for example, urban areas, they are in many countries still never eligible for CAP support. In some countries it's more flexible, but then there are several countries where it's still not. It's more or less like a divide between the city and the countryside is being reproduced in the CAP. And I think if we really want to work towards more a food system approach and think in terms of urban-rural continuities, urban food systems, city-region food systems, then this is really something where we should look for new opportunities. So I would call also here on national governments who make the national rural development plans, of course, and Brussels as well to think on what could be measures that have a role in this type of areas to promote urban food production around the city or in peri-urban areas.
Yeah, extremely interesting point. We don't have that much time anymore, but I do want to give space to one more Slido question.
All right, perfect. There are two on the top, so I'm just going to take the freedom to choose one. How do you remunerate participants in living labs that are not partners? We're asking a lot from practitioners with different benefits, paid, non-paid time. Yeah, and to just add maybe from FoodSHIFT, we have, for example, also our 90+ innovators who were all not paid, and we all heard from them that it was a challenge to engage because there was just no funding. So how do we do that? How do we ensure that that there is funding and then it goes to the people that need it?
I can maybe just lead on from this, but eventually it lands on your table. Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes embarrassing, of course, if we kind of sit with a big project and then we ask the individual just to come to meetings and to send all kinds of answers and information. And then it's all on goodwill base. And we know, meanwhile, that many of these partners, especially if they have something to show, they got lots of these requests. So there's just kind of coming research groups, universities, they're knocking at their door. And they really think twice whether they again and again respond to this. So I think it would be fair and necessary to offer something back and to build this into these projects, or have something, you know, in parallel, which allows, you know, this kind of co-funding of expertise and knowledge from the outside.
Follow up on this. Totally agree. I don't think I have the bulletproof answer to that, but I think there is a common understanding that networking doesn't happen on its own. And it also needs to be remunerated. So I think in falling projects, what you see is also that network building and these aspects are really built into the project as a specific task, and then resources need to be allocated for it from the beginning onwards and planned as such in the proposal. So I think there we have a learning also on our side to really build this into future calls and proposals, so that the outreach activities you want to do are actually planned in from the beginning.
Yes, and I think like me as a civil servant, we also just have to look at possibilities within the city to do that. I remember, I think Kurt, it was you, during one of my very first days I was working for FoodSHIFT, we had a meeting of VVSG, and I think it was you who in the room said, we were all civil servants and said, you are all here, you're all paid for being here, and I am a farmer, my cows are waiting for me, and I'm not paid to be here. And if they would have, sorry for all the professors and academics here, if an academic would ask €1,000 to give a keynote speech, everyone would pay it without even asking, is this normal that we are not paying this farmer to do this? And is it normal that we pay someone who is also already publicly paid €1,000 for an hour keynote speech? And sorry, I get emotional by this because I have had so much discussion. My brother is an academic and professor, and I have huge discussions with him that he gets it's not for me, but it's like I've always from the beginning asked in the city, if I invite a chef to come to my steering group, if I invite a farmer, I want to be able to pay them. And I've paid them. It's not a big amount because it was difficult, but it was the first time that someone asked this question. And if they have like other formal steering committees, they often pay people to be there. If they have a jury to have a job interview, people are apparently, I didn't even know that, people are paid to do this, even although they do it within their current job. And there's something wrong there. So I think that was a very good question. I think, yes, if we want to involve those people to have their expertise, to know from their practice, to know their, how they see the future, how we can help them, we also have to foresee this. And of course, we cannot help them take care of their cows or do these kind of things, but through other ways, we can give something back.
Yeah, it did. Everyone agrees? Great. So we're running out of time. So what I'd like for the speakers to do now is to leave us a bit with an optimistic message, or again, a call to action, a call for collaboration that you would like to convey to all of us here within 30 seconds. Let's start from Kathy.
Well, call to action. Well, I think a simple one is put sustainable food transition on the agenda everywhere where you go, in everything, in every meeting that you have. And it could be health, it could be all the different disciplines that we have, but just keep on putting it on the agenda. If you research institute, city or whatever, we can all play our role there. So that's the call to action.
Yeah, I'm now involved in a new initiative, which I think is very interesting. It's very young, so I don't know where it's going to go to, but it's a collaboration of municipalities in the Netherlands, but it's not only cities. It's in a region made up of 3 small cities, and together with 5 rural municipalities. So make a regional food plan instead of an urban food plan. I think that's very interesting.
Yes, very briefly, I already mentioned the partnership that will start next year. So really invite you to watch this space, because I'm sure there's a lot of good things coming and possibilities to engage. There's already preparatory action, which is called Food Paths. So they're paving the way for the partnership. They're already active. They're doing outreach activities, also content activities. So really invite you to have a look at what they're doing and to engage. And then I'm sure my colleague Karen Fabry already mentioned it, but I nevertheless will do it again. Really warmly invite you to our FoodSHIFT2030 conference, 4th and 5th of December in Brussels. You can also join online. I'm sure we're going to have really interesting discussions, inspiring sessions. So really invite you to join that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we are just since some time working in a project which is a spin-off of FoodSHIFT Pathways. and it's on education and middle school level education, where we see and prepare learning material coming from projects like FoodSHIFT for these children and to hand to the teachers to basically exercise and learn to understand what sustainability and sustainable food means. And everybody having kids knows that's not an easy task eventually. So, but it's a very rewarding one. So that I think is a spark of hope that if we continue along these lines, and this comes earlier in school, that will already be quite a success. Thank you.
So yeah, Henk mentioned the importance of sharing and learning, replicating solution. I think both at either in the regional level, national level, Eurocities is a working group of food experts. We try to meet regularly around different areas of work. We collaborate with the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact so as to not to duplicate, but reinforce effort. And indeed, for example, last month, I was really impressed because we started to discuss food justice approach, where we had really the lead of few cities, especially from France and the UK, moving from food aid solution to food justice solution. And I think all the other cities in the room were really inspired, and we could really hopefully see in a few months that they're also thinking differently. Kathy, you were also there. And indeed, Kathy is also very much involved in the working group on food. So it's really we need to invest more and more in capacity building and proper capacity building. So not only a meeting that lasts a day, but really focusing on replication of solution.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very important messages and concrete messages as well. Because this is the last panel I'll moderate, I'll also allow myself to give a short what you just did. I just want to echo what Kathy said, to be honest. Putting sustainable food systems on the agenda, very important. As I said in the beginning, especially at EU level, we're seeing less of a motivation in this respect at the moment. So it's really about being present, just being there, saying the same things again, again, and again, as Silke said. That was all I wanted to say. Thank you to our speakers. Huge round of applause. And it has really been a pleasure to be here with you.
Another round of applause for Sylvia, from the excellent panelist. And we are into our last session for the day, and I invite Christian back to the stage. You can stay sitting if you wish, but Christian, please come up for the final words.
Luke. Yeah. So to conclude this conference, I would like to start by thanking all our presenters and panelists for valuable insights and inspiring discussions. And thanks a lot also to the organizing team from IFOAM and University of Copenhagen, including Alba, Luke, Paul, Cindy, and Thomas. And Lena, my God. And thanks also, of course, to all of you joining here today. So I hope that you got some good take-home messages here. And I'm sure we all have our own take-home messages, but I'd like to share what my personal take-home messages are. So I have learned that we need to bridge the apparent but false polarization between sustainable food system transformation and food security, and that food policy initiatives at the city region level is essential, not only for inspiring other city regions, but also for inspiring national and EU food policy. Then I've learned that we need to be careful not to overcomplicate things when we talk about food system transformation. Instead, we need to talk to the hearts and the emotions of people, build relations, and apply practice-based approaches to ensure an inclusive transformation of the food system that engages all food system stakeholders and citizens. Then I've learned that asking the question organic versus plant-based is a silly question that may still spark an interesting debate. But I'm also full of hope that advocates for organic farming and plant-based food can indeed join forces and work towards a more plant-based food system based on agroecological principles with lower density livestock. Then I've learned now here that we need really to ensure commitment from policymakers to provide support for transforming the food system at the local level in the city regions, and also provide support for the networking activities. So furthermore, it's very important that we coordinate different projects, initiatives, networks, and partnerships that are already working on transforming the food system at different levels. FoodSHIFT is a member of such a network, the FoodSHIFT2030 project collaboration network, where 70 projects representing an investment of 70 million euro are joining forces to work together on concrete actions and thereby maximize the impact of the individual projects. And luckily, this network is already also in contact with a new sustainable food systems partnership that Daniela mentioned to ensure like further coordination. And a corresponding living lab of a corresponding network of living labs is also being established. So now, whereas there's only 2 months to go for the FoodSHIFT project, I'm proud to say that we have made a significant impact in our city regions. And whereas the project may be coming to an end, the FoodSHIFT community and the FoodSHIFT spirit lives on. In FoodSHIFT Plus, that you're all invited to join. And I really encourage all of you to join FoodSHIFT Plus, because with these recent developments in the EU and the threat that actually the farm to fork strategy and the legislative framework for sustainable food systems will be put on hold, all of your work and commitment to transform the food system is more important and more needed than ever. So let's take that commitment with us in the future through new actions to transform the food system, both at the local, regional, and national level. Thanks a lot all for joining today. And don't go yet, because next up we have actually the labs, the stalls. So if you haven't had a chance to visit the different labs, then please go there and talk with them to get insights about what work they have been doing and are doing to transform the food system in their city region. And then, Paul, we have a So again, thanks a lot for joining. Now, time for networking and exploring the living labs of the FoodSHIFT project.